This is the final talk in our segment on human factors, and I'm just taking the liberty here in this last talk to discuss something that I think is incredibly important. This is personally very, very important to me about architecture, and that is the ability of architecture to enhance our sense of community, to make us feel more like we're in this world helping each other, supporting each other, because we're a part of a community. And how can it be a tool for bringing people together, for helping them solve social problems, and for really creating a stronger, more powerful, more amenable life for people in any environment? So we're going to be looking at that at several scales over the next few minutes. We're going to be looking at three very different buildings in this talk and addressing three very different communities. But in each of these cases, what we're looking at they have in common is that they're building a sense of community where people relate to each other. And the building is very much a tool for that. The first of the three that we're going to look at is a building in London. This one is called the Idea Store. The architect is David Adjaye. We looked at David Adjaye's work at the National Museum for African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. David Adjaye was one of the architects of that. He's an African-born architect practicing in London. And he did this Idea Store in 2005. It's in a neighborhood in London that, especially at the time, but it's a blue-collar neighborhood. It's not an affluent neighborhood particularly. And it had been a little underserved by libraries, by the sort of branch libraries up to that point. And so the library system in London was searching for maybe what is a neighborhood library about? Maybe it's the normal old neighborhood library doesn't count anymore. This neighborhood had been, many years ago, a Jewish neighborhood, what they literally called a ghetto at that point. And the library was dominated by, it had one of the largest collections of Yiddish literature anywhere in the world. So it was a distinguished library, but very specific. And the Jewish community had pretty much moved out of that neighborhood. And it just wasn't a library that served that community. So they were reinventing the idea of what a library might be. And they weren't even calling it a library, they're calling it the Idea Store. And they made a location for it that was maybe an atypical location for a library. It's on kind of the high street in that neighborhood, and the high street has the market. And this is not one of those cute European markets. This is, yeah, they have fruits and vegetables, but they also sell underwear and toothpaste and, just your normal things you might get at a department, at a regular store in the US. They sell at these open air markets in London and in this neighborhood. So it's just a down and dirty market street along there. And the building becomes very much an extension of the market. The market is where everybody goes, and they're interacting with it all the time. It's an everyday activity. And this is saying, wait, this building, this Idea Store, this is meant to be an everyday activity, just something you do all the time. And so it embraces the street here. It actually comes out and grabs a piece of the street. There's an escalator that goes directly up to the second floor. So not just the ground floor is connected to the public space, but the second floor as well. And then programmatically, they put all kinds of kind of crazy things in here. There are counseling centers that are in the library. There are dance studios that are in the library. There's fitness and nutrition counseling that's in the library. They're really trying, it's meant to give you lots of ideas about how you can live your life better. And social services, some of them are embedded in the idea store here. So as you're coming along here, and everybody in the community, richest person, poorest person, they all go to the market. People who would never go in a library, not interested in education whatsoever, they're out in this market and they're embraced by this and they're kind of tempted. Yeah, maybe I'll step in there and see if there's something that could benefit me. So it's very, very much a public engagement that happens there. And then when you get inside, it's all about a kind of casual hangout space, not fancy at all, but it's a place where you can have meetings and you can have club rooms. They even have AA. When I was there, somebody said, yeah, it's where AA is meeting over there. But it's a very collective environment of all kinds of people coming there. At points in it, you get beautiful views of the skyline of London. It's a very pleasant space, but also a very relaxed space. Nothing pretentious about this space at all. Those notions of humanism, not pretentious, this building has that in spades. It's kind of a fun, lively atmosphere, lots of color, lots of really great places to just sit and read or work or check your email, or that have beautiful views out and have really nice light. In London, you love getting natural light because it's a northern climate and it's kind of cold and gray a lot. So having lots of light is really important. They have some books, but the books are not the focus of this library. The focus of the library is really interaction of people. And they do have a lot of computer technology, and many of the people in this neighborhood would not have access to the internet. So you come to the Idea Store in large part because it's free access to the internet. And that's all over the place. There are TVs hanging around everywhere, blaring, not your normal library atmosphere at all. But it really makes this a community center. And it makes it a real focus of that neighborhood. And it has been transformational in that neighborhood. It has made people who maybe wouldn't ever learn to get on the internet because it's there by the market, because it feels so accessible, because it's an everyday part of life. They wander in there and they get engaged, and now they're wired. They're able to communicate via this new medium with the rest of the world. So it's been a very successful tool for helping that community plug into a world that was difficult for them to access before. And in the end, it makes a lovely, lively, casual environment, both inside and outside, both for the market, and sort of making a livelier market street there, but also on the inside, just incredibly pleasant place to be and to work. So the argument here is that with architecture, by making the design appropriate, one can actually give a great service to that disadvantaged community in London and give opportunities to those people that would not be there otherwise. Okay, second example is shifting gears significantly. This one is serving a very different kind of community. This is the Stata Center at M.I.T. The architect is Frank Gehry. We've looked at a lot of his work. This was completed in 2003. So there was a retrospective exhibit of Frank Gehry's work at the Guggenheim Museum in New York in 2002. And I went to see that exhibit. The Guggenheim is that museum by Frank Lloyd Wright, the spiral right on Fifth Avenue across from Central Park. Super prestigious museum. They cleared the whole thing out and had an exhibit of Frank Gehry's work. And Frank Gehry works a lot in models, and he saves all of those models. So there were these beautiful models of everything from houses he did in his early career to huge, ambitious civic projects that were in the works in 2002. So you go through all along that spiral ramp, you're seeing chronologically Frank Gehry's career, And then when you get to the top, the very last room, a big rectangular room, was filled with information on the data center. At that point, the data center was not completed. It was under construction. But this was really, really telling. It was not images of the data center. There was not a single picture of what that building would look like. It was a whole depiction of the programming process of the data center, how they made decisions about activities and uses and functions and how they were related to each other, and all these diagrams and all these polls they did and data they collected. And it was really explaining how they understood how to put this building together functionally. Now, mostly you don't think of Frank Gehry as a big function guy. You think of Frank Gehry as, this guy's a sculptor. He makes these wild-ass crazy shapes and forms. And you know, this data center does not disappoint on that account. It's pretty wild-ass crazy forms. But what that room in the Guggenheim Museum showed was, yeah, that's part of architecture for Frank Gehry, but there's another whole part of architecture that's about function, and that really is about behavior and about understanding people's lives as they live in these buildings and how the building can enhance their sense of community or not. And it was a fascinating part of the exhibit. The very pinnacle of the whole exhibit, when you got up there, was about function and about how the building affected people's behaviors. So it was really based on an observation about the larger MIT campus. The older part of the campus, the original building, had this long, long corridor, kind of interminable corridor. And then all these wings came off of it. And that's a kind of famous trope for MIT, is this endless long corridor. It was about 12 feet wide, and it was just this massive humanity moving up and down and through the campus. And in some ways it's really good because it's cold in Boston and you had climate control and you could get to all parts of the campus via this huge corridor. But it also was deadly institutional and boring and dull. And they tried everything, color and everything, to open it up, but it's still pretty dull. But Frank Gehry took that notion and he said, well, I'm going to organize this building with a very strong path. So there's going to be a route that you take through this building and that people can take going from one side of the campus to the other in bad weather. They can zip into the data center and go along this path and zip out on the other end and save themselves freezing. So he took that notion from the original building. But instead of it being this deadly dull space, it's this incredibly lively, interesting, beautifully lit, beautifully colored kind of environment you move through, going from point A to point B on the MIT campus. It also became a place for things to happen. So you could see all of these little bits and pieces agglomerating along that corridor. So you see all of these functions, like a conference room that plugs into that corridor, or all of these office towers that plug into that corridor, or this exhibit space that plugs into that corridor. So all of these little bits and pieces that are very sculptural, but also are very literally talking about the functions of this building and how all of those little episodes become the larger building strung along this corridor. Now, you enter at that point and you're introduced to this long corridor. And along that corridor are plenty of places to just hang out. There's a big old blackboard right here. And I've seen people just whacking away with physics formulas and whatever they're thinking about and talking about, and chalking it up on that blackboard. There are exhibits of different things that are along this path, but that that corridor is the kind of organizing device. And it is a real kind of community street. There are plenty of places to just hang out along there. There are benches and places to sit everywhere. There's a branch library that's along that corridor, so you can request a book and they'll deliver it there, or you can turn in a book and they'll take it to the larger library system. There's a workout space, right there along that corridor, and you can look in and see people sweating, but that's very much a part of that urban scene along that corridor. Tons of food, lots of just casual eating places where you can get a coffee or get a bite to eat. There's a kind of sit-down eating area that's off of that as well. So he's making not a deadly dull, just, travel area, but he's making this place that as you move along there, you've got all kinds of activities that you're looking at and seeing and understanding and participating in as you move along that street. And it makes a really lively kind of community environment there. Now, Mr. Stata, who gave the money for this was something that was very important to him. So he gave a ton of money for this building, and he said, I want Frank Gehry to be the architect. And Frank Gehry sometimes is thought of as a budget buster. And so Mr. Stata also said, and if the building goes over budget, I'll cover it. So Frank Gehry went into this knowing that he had the support of this donor. But the donor said, Frank, I want you to make a really great, amazing building, but also I really want this to be about collaboration. I want this to be a place where scientists who often are maybe not particularly collaborative, maybe they tend to be a little more isolated and singular and alone in their work. I want you to make a building where people talk to each other, where scientists talk to each other. This is primarily computer science, although there's also linguistics, and it is an interdisciplinary building. But he wanted these people interacting with each other, and his idea was, in fields of digital technology these days, it's too complicated. One person can't do crap. I mean, you have to work in teams. You have to work in large groups. You have to collaborate. And these are skills that these students need to be developing. So he said, I want this to be very much a collaborative environment. So that's what Gehry's doing here. He's making all of these spaces where people hang out and run into each other and have informal interaction, places where people, when they have their coffee, they're also discussing ideas and thinking about things. And there is this big, rich, collaborative environment that people can live and work and interact in. And that goes all the way through the building, not just on the ground floor in that street, but you're constantly seeing up and down into other areas of the building. You're seeing little conference rooms where people are having a little talk. You're seeing down into robotics labs where they're doing experiments. It's a place where things are visible. Even people can express the heck out of who they are, their travels or their interests, and that's all over in the building. I love the workspaces in this building. They're like workshops, and you can just walk around the building and you can see all these cool labs with all these crazy things, and MIT people can do pretty crazy things. And so all of that's visible to you as you walk through this environment. And it tempts people to talk to each other. Oh my God, what the heck are you doing here? And maybe that has something to do with the technology I'm developing in my lab over there. But Mr. Stata wanted that communication back and forth between scientists and engineers and technologists because he thinks it makes better science. So that was the goal. I'm an MIT alum, and so I'm on an advisory committee, or I was for about 10 years. And when I was on that committee, I would go very regularly. And when this building was completed, I got arranged to have a really good tour of it. And then after I got that tour, that night, I happened to be sitting by the provost at a dinner. And the provost knew I was an architect, and he and he knew I'd been to see the Stata Center, and he was wanting to talk about it. And he said, you know, we built 2 buildings very recently, the Stata Center and Brain and Cognitive Science across the street from it. And in both cases, we gave the architects the same charge. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Use the architecture as a tool for helping these people interact with each other. And he said, in the Stata Center, I could not be happier. Those people all really mix with each other, and the ideas just flow in between them. And it's been really good for the science that's produced in that building. In Brain and Cognitive Science, instead of a street, they used a kind of atrium, and all the labs were around this atrium. But he said the circulation paths were such that you could go in the building, go up the elevator, go to your lab, go down the elevator, go out of your lab without ever going through the atrium. And people didn't hang out in the atrium. So he said in Brain and Cognitive Science, scientists don't talk to each other. Very big disappointment. And the architects assured me there were going to be people hanging out in this atrium and interacting, and they're not doing it. And he said, now I can see why that doesn't work at Brain and Cognitive Science, and it works so beautifully at the Stata Center. But Frank Gehry got it and knew how to enhance community by the circulation and the movement and the location of activities and things through the building, so that in the Stata Center he really got this wonderful interactive environment. So when I was given a tour by one of the guys who worked there afterwards, I'm going down on the elevator with him, thanking him for the time he took, blah, 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 blah. We get off the elevator. But going down on that elevator, there was a graduate student. And he was a classic MIT nerd, kind of Pillsbury Doughboy body, trying to grow a beard, but you're not quite getting it in there yet. And probably not very socially adept guy. One of those guys is super, super smart, but probably not likely to interact with his peers because he's a nerd. So we get off the elevator, and I say goodbye to the guy who gave me a tour, and this graduate student comes up to me and said, you want to see my place? And that's, well, sure. And he said, I got a cool place. So we get back on the elevator, and he takes me up, and this is where he works, up in the Stata Center. And it was so moving to hear this guy talk about how much he loved his lab and how much he loved interacting with all his buddies in this open, crazy, place to just lounge around and eat and work, and just this very informal workshop lab space. Just exactly right for him. Now, yes, it's a badass cool building in terms of form, but for my money, what's really great about the Stata Center is it is a powerful tool for enhancing community and collaboration among the people who work in that building. The final project I want us to look at is Discovery Green in Houston. This is a public space. It's a 12-acre park that was put on the east side of downtown Houston. All of the east side of downtown Houston was open parking lots like that. It was a mess. They put in the George R. Brown Convention Center as a way of trying to stimulate development over here. Didn't work. They put in the Minute Maid Ballpark, trying to stimulate development. Didn't work. They tried to put in the Toyota Arena, sort of back behind us here. That didn't work. Still open parking lots, no private development, no man's land, ugly, desolate. And then there were some philanthropists in Houston that said, let's make a park in here. And they bought up the land, and they put together philanthropy to partner with the city to create Discovery Green, which is a 12-acre park in the middle of downtown Houston. And it's got a parking garage underneath it. You enter that right here and go down. So what parking lots used to be there, plus a bunch more parking, is now accommodated below. And then there are all kinds of great activities here. There are, above that ramp down to the parking garage is now a little hill and a slope, and that's a performance area where people sit on the lawn, and there's a stage right here with the water right behind it. There's a wonderful little casual restaurant here. There's a branch library there. There's a place to check out equipment, boats, park kinds of activities. Here there's a wonderful little interactive fountain for little kids to splash around here. There's the kid area through here. There's a playground. There's a puppet stage. There's dog parks over here for big dogs and little dogs. There's a 5-star restaurant over here, very exquisite food, and with lots of outdoor balconies and spill-out spaces there with beautiful views to the skyline. There's a bunch of event spaces over here where you can have weddings and receptions and events for people from the convention center over there. And then there's a big green kind of open lawn in the center that's just for throwing frisbees or throwing a football or playing games or pick up soccer or whatever on that green in the center. But it's all carefully programmed around different activities. And this place is just mobbed. It was originally designed for, they were optimistically expecting about 500,000 visitors a year. This was Texas. It's hot. And people said, oh no, people aren't going to go to a park. No, it's too hot. So they were optimistically expecting 500,000 people a year. They now have 1.5 million people a year routinely in Discovery Green. It is a huge kind of living room for Houston when they had the Super Bowl in 2017. That was headquartered at Discovery Green in Houston. News reporters go to, if they want to let you know they're in Houston, a backdrop of Discovery Green, everybody knows Discovery Green. So it's this kind of really popular public space for the city. Now, the thing I want to talk about here is this notion of enhancing community. So one day I was visiting Discovery Green, and I had parked a couple of blocks away, and when I parked next to a family that had a kind of beat up old car, and there were like 5 or 6 kids. They all pile out of the car, they open the trunk, they get their cooler and their blankets and all their stuff. They're going to walk down and have a picnic at Discovery Green. Clearly a low-income family really enjoying the park. So I walked behind them, and they walked along here, and they set up under these trees right there. They set up their little picnic. And the kids started playing around in this area through here. The kiddie play area is right over there. So they're playing around there. At the same time, there is this very well-heeled family, probably River Oaks family, that clearly had a lot of money. And mom and dad had come to Discovery Green. And this is a 5-star restaurant right there. And there's a bar at that end and a deck that goes out with good views of the city. So they're sitting out there having their drinks and watching their 2 little blonde-headed kids play out over here as well. So before long, little blonde-headed kids from the affluent family and the little kids from the family in the beat-up car are playing with each other. And that's what happens in Discovery Green. People from very different backgrounds are all in it together in Discovery Green. And they're participating in activities of all sorts in the park. Now, it's not just that the park itself is a wonderful environment there, but it's had this huge impact around it. So you saw in that earlier slide, there was nothing all the way around. Now, brand new multifamily, a high-rise building there, brand new office building there. There's a brand new Marriott hotel there, another new hotel there. All the way around Discovery Green, it became a magnet for people who want to be there. So now visitors who are coming to stay at the hotel, or people who live here, people who work there, they also have their everyday lives plugged into Discovery Green and the activities that go on there. It's a design issue you make environments have that kind of magnetism to draw people together by doing things like this incredible piece of art by Margot Sawyer, international artist. That actually is the way you come out of the parking garage, up a stairway there, but then the top of it becomes this piece of art. These interactive fountains, just things for people to do there. Plenty of places for informal, casual activities or more structured play areas for kids over there. There's the interactive fountain in a different kind of mode. They have ice skating here in the wintertime. They have a lot of planned activities. There are more than 600 events that are planned there every year. But then there's tons and tons of just casual, informal activities. And everybody from every walk of life in Houston, from people who go to the Grove, which is a very expensive, very exclusive, high-dollar restaurant, or to receptions for weddings or whatever in that kind of Tony environment, all the way down to just down and dirty, everybody splashing around, getting wet and being crazy. But that juxtaposition of all of those things makes a place that really promotes community. Now, a couple of years ago, there was an article that was written. There was a research project that was done on public spaces in Texas. And there was an article that was written, and I want to read just a little excerpt from that article about Discovery Green. And in that article, it basically made the point that this is an egalitarian park. This is a place where everybody comes together. And it talks about the other public spaces they were evaluating in Texas. Not so much. And this researcher was trying to figure out, well, why does that work in Discovery Green? And he's saying it's a design issue. You can design for an egalitarian environment where everybody comes together or not. And this is what he says. Discovery Green is much more successful in creating a warm, down-to-earth, democratic atmosphere than any of the other places we studied. Its materials are plain and tactile, primarily unpolished wood, stone, and glass. Here the designs of features from sidewalks to benches to buildings are basic and solid, not flamboyant. These choices reflect a welcoming, timeless quality. Even the high-end restaurant does not attempt to outshine the other features of the park. Its simple architecture is fully harmonious with the other buildings. The emphasis on equity here is palpable. Now, I just want to make the point that architecture can be this very potent tool for making our world more common for all of us, more accessible for all of us, making it a place where everybody can come together and feel like a more cohesive society. And the more we use architecture as that kind of tool, the more it can solve some potential social ills of the culture. So it's just to say, I'm putting that out there. This is very much a personal belief that architecture is definitely a powerful tool for enhancing community. Okay, see you next time.